Jersey Devil discovered in woods near Harding Highway. Published Thursday, October 22nd, 1924. Woodstown, Salem County, through the Monitor Register. Queer animal baffles identification. Has paddles for front feet, hind claws like cat. Weird screams heard and footprints seen in snow. Mate believed in woods as noises continue. To be sent to the University of Pennsylvania. Residents of Newfield and Franklinville and vicinity are all excited over the finding of the strangest kind of beast that has baffled all attempts to identify it. The animal was found by Morel Langley, who lives with his sister in the familiar old hotel at the junction of Harding Highway and the Franklinville-Iona Road. The animal is about 2.5 feet long and will weigh about 12 pounds. It was examined on Sunday by a representative of the Monitor Register. Perhaps the most extraordinary feature of this weird creature is that it has jointed triangular-shaped paddles in lieu of front feet. Its hind feet are like those of a cat and have sharp claws. The head is shaped quite like a cat, but the mouth is nothing more than a small round hole containing no teeth. Though the animal has been dead for some weeks, some fur still remains. This is a tawny color, a sort of mixture between the color of a cat and a monkey. The tail is short and stubby. Hundreds of people have visited the home of Henry Finger at Franklinville, where it has been exhibited, but no one has even dared to guess what sort of animal it is. Langley found the beast hanging in a pine tree in the woods a short distance from the Harding Highway. Heard weird screams. For some time, Mrs. Langley and her brother and other persons in the vicinity have been terrified by weird screams, sounding like the crying of a human being in distress. When the beast was found, people in the community breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that these ghastly nocturnal noises would cease. But even since discovering the beast, the noises have continued, and now it is feared that a mate is still at large in the woods. Believes it can fly. Mrs. Langley states that she believes that the animal could fly. She states that she and her brother were standing on the porch one evening, listening to the screams when something heavy flew into the large tree at the side of the house, scattering small twigs and leaves about and making a great commotion. Mrs. Langley, peering up, spied a large, indistinct shape in the tree, and not stopping to investigate, the couple went into the house. A former owner of the hotel declares last winter he saw strange tracks in the snow near the hotel, the front tracks being shaped like a small horse hoof, while the hind tracks were like those of a cat. Mr. Finger, who has been exhibiting the find, will send it to the Museum of the University of Pennsylvania. The region in which the beast was found is particularly desolate. The ground is sandy and is dotted with huckleberry bushes and scrub pine trees. Many persons declare that this beast is a miniature of the famous Jersey Devil, and they declare that a hunt will be made to determine, if possible, what is causing the screams heard so many nights. That the animal is extremely peculiar, and that its discovery has caused no little excitement and interest is well established. And it would be interesting to find out definitely just what this strange beast is. Definite identification might prove strengthening to numerous small boys in the vicinity who perhaps, of necessity, might be out after dark. And a termination of the weird noises might give over more people into the arms of Morpheus when he stretches them over the vicinity mentioned. Murder Mystery, published Wednesday, September 28th, 1910, Toowoomba, Queensland, through the Darling Downs Gazette. Murder Mystery, Crippen Case in America, corpse buried in a basement, mystery of a girl's disappearance, medical man arrested, police searching for his assistant, an extraordinary crime. San Francisco, Saturday. A ghastly tragedy has just come to light at Paso Robles, a popular resort in San Luis Obispo County, California, on the Southern Pacific Railway. The crime bears an extraordinary resemblance in its main features to the mystery of the disappearance of Mrs. Crippen, and the discovery of what are believed to be her mutilated remains in the basement of a house in Camden Road, London. 5 months ago, Miss Eva Swan, a young lady employed as a stenographer at the surgery of Dr. Grant, a local medico, disappeared suddenly, and in a most mysterious manner. Paso Robles is not a large place, and within a few hours of the girl's disappearance, active search was being made for her in all directions. Not only the city itself, but the whole countryside as well was scoured in the most thorough manner, but all search proved resultless. Not a trace of her could be found. Diligent inquiries by the police revealed whatever had become of the young lady, she had not left by railway or any of the ordinary means of transport. Indeed, from the moment that Miss Swan left the boarding house where she had lived on the morning of her disappearance, no one, as far as could be ascertained, had seen her. Nothing discomfited by failure, the police maintained the search for the girl. Her friends also spared no effort to discover what had become of her. Up till 2 days ago, all efforts to solve the mystery had proved absolutely resultless. On Thursday, however, the police got information that put them on the right track. It came from a young man named Gordon, who acts as assistant to Dr. Grant, and it led the police to an unoccupied house in Eureka Street. Last night, after a 2-day search over the premises, the police unearthed in the basement of the house a badly decomposed corpse. It was that of a young girl, and though the features were no longer recognizable, the authorities are confident that the body is that of Miss Swan. Prompt arrests. The next steps on the part of the police were taken with promptitude. Dr. Grant, Miss Swan's employer, was immediately arrested. A woman named Mary Messersmith was also apprehended on suspicion of being concerned in the murder. The police are now searching actively for a young man named Sachs, who was employed by the prisoner Grant at the time of Miss Swan's disappearance. They believe that Sachs had an active part in the mystery. The house in Eureka Street. Diligent inquiries are being prosecuted into the recent history of the unoccupied house in Eureka Street. The place has been empty for a month or so. During the past 5 months, it has been occupied for 2 brief periods only. The last tenants were 2 men of whom little or nothing is known. They only stayed in the place, however, for a few days, and Miss Swan having been missing for a long time before they went into the house, the police do not connect them with the crime. A mysterious trunk. The discovery of the corpse has invested with new and intense interest a discovery made in the house in Eureka Street about 2 months ago. About that time, a family named Crotton moved into the place. In addition to the usual rubbish incidental to unoccupied houses, they found a large trunk. There were dark stains on it that looked like blood, and the trunk itself emitted a most obnoxious smell, as though it had been the receptacle for decomposing animal matter. There was something so strongly suggestive of crime about the trunk that the Crottons lost no time in communicating with the police. An examination of the trunk showed it to contain female clothing and wisps of what seemed to be human hair. The police, however, do not seem to have connected the box and its strange contents in any way with Miss Swan's disappearance. They sent the trunk to the local health authorities, who commissioned the city analyst to make a biological examination of the stains with which it was disfigured. The analyst, however, reported that the stains were only paint. That divested the whole business of serious significance, and the incident of the trunk was soon forgotten. The Crottons left the house not long afterwards. Last night's tragic discovery, however, indicates that the trunk played an important part in a ghastly crime. In all probability, the corpse was concealed in this trunk before it was buried, though for how long a period is of course only matter for conjecture at present. The missing girl. Miss Swan does not appear to have any relatives in Paso Robles. Up till April 30th, she boarded with a Mrs. Harry Weir. It was on that day that she disappeared. Previous to taking service with Dr. Grant as stenographer, Miss Swan was a school teacher. Detectives hard at work. Victim's hair stained with acid. San Francisco, Sunday. The detectives are hard at work unraveling the mystery of Miss Eva Swan's disappearance. They have succeeded in establishing the fact that the hair of the girl whose body was dug up on Friday night in the basement of the house in Eureka Street, Paso Robles, was dyed after the victim had been done to death. The dye used appears to have been a powerful acid, but the process of disguise was not complete, the original color of the hair being discernible in places. The detectives are now confronted with the puzzling fact that the wisps of hair found in the trunk do not correspond with the color of Miss Swan's hair. The clothing found in the trunk is not, according to Mrs. Weir, identical with any of that belonging to the missing girl. Mrs. Weir declares that the detectives are mistaken in believing that the body found buried in the basement is that of Miss Swan's, basing her belief principally upon the negative evidence of clothing. She admits, however, that the real color of the hair on the corpse is similar to that of the missing stenographer. The police are confident that the corpse is that of Miss Swan, and that its discovery solves, in one respect, the mystery that has been baffling them for 5 months. Skeletons of Giants in Alaska. Published Sunday, November 18, 1900. San Francisco, through the San Francisco Call. Skeletons of Giants in Alaska. Ancient cemetery uncovered in the Atlin Gold District. Special dispatch to the Call. Vancouver, November 17th. James L. Perkinson, an American miner of Atlin, arrived here today with news of the findings of a number of skeletons in an ancient Indian cemetery in the north, which is of startling scientific interest. Perkinson is one of the owners of the Yellow Jacket, a rich claim which is supposed to be the fountainhead of Pine, the principal creek in Atlin District. 2 weeks ago, the first excavations were being made for a new tunnel on the property, and what appears to have been an old Indian burying ground was opened up. 5 skeletons, nearly complete, were exhumed, and each is the set of bones that belonged to a giant of prehistoric times. One of the skeletons measures over 7 feet in length, so that the man must have been considerably over that height. Then there were 2 others of within an inch of 7 feet, and the remaining 2 were more than 6 feet in length, and the men were of gigantic frame. The altitude is high, and the ground was half frozen, so that the bones were preserved almost intact. Perkinson says that he expects if they had kept on digging, they would have found many more, as these were lying comparatively close together. The bones of the fingers and toes had crumbled away, but the finger of one skeleton hand was sufficiently strong to hold a ring of what appears to be lead or some similar base metal. The skeletons were unusually well formed, but one unique feature was that the arms were several inches shorter than ordinarily appears, while the size of the bones of the forearms was enormous in comparison to the usual models. Beside 2 of the skeletons were spears, rudely shaped with a soft metal and pointed with sharp stones. The spears were only about 3 feet long and 5 inches thick at the top, tapering at the lower end. The top contained a socket, into which a wooden shaft was probably placed in order to wield the big piece of metal. Other pieces of stone and carved metal were found. The general physical appearance of the skeletons, according to the cursory examination of the miners, was similar to that of the Indians of the present day. They were certainly of the flathead type of the present northern tribes. That the burying place is of ancient origin is evidenced by the fact that the Indians say none of their tribesmen have lived within 50 miles of this place as far back as stories have been handed down. There are several mounds presumably made by the Indians in the vicinity of the new mine tunnel now being extended. Ghost Ship of the Far North. Published Sunday, July 17, 1938. Laredo, Texas, through the Laredo Times. Ghost Ship of the Far North. Abandoned to the Arctic ice 7 years ago, the steamer Beichimo is sighted again on her weird cruise to nowhere. Unmanned for 7 years, an ice-sheathed phantom of the Arctic, the world's most famous ghost ship, has flashed into view again, to revive a story as strange as this crewless vessel itself. For only a few minutes was this wraith-like vessel visible to a few Arctic observers before disappearing again to the mists. To continue cruising in uncharted, ice-locked seas around the North Pole, a voyage that can end in only ultimate destruction. 6 times men have seen the ship since the ice first swept her away from civilization in 1931. How far the vessel has sailed, where it has been, no one can even guess. Although the ice apparently carries its prisoner over a similar course each year, a premise borne out by the fact that the ghost has been sighted 3 times off Point Barrow at varying distances ranging from 7 to 110 miles away. Never before in the history of the North, seafaring men say, has a vessel survived more than 2 seasons in the crushing, grinding, shifting chaos of the polar ice. Each time the ghost is seen, the appearance is proclaimed as definitely the last, but the ghost sails on. What is the history of this fantastic craft that has successfully defied the elements for 7 years? This astonishingly vital ghost ship is a 1,300-ton iron steamer Beichimo, owned by the Hudson Bay Company, and for 9 years the only link between the outside and the remote fur trading posts inside the Arctic Circle. In July 1931, the Beichimo sailed out of Vancouver, BC on her last voyage. Deep into the ice-choked western Arctic Sea, she drove to visit 8 Hudson Bay Company ports, discharge supplies, and take on $1 million cargo of furs. Then, with the winter closing in, the race to Point Barrow and open water began. Sailing along with a strong northeast gale astern the Beichimo seemed sure of a 10th victory over the polar pack, at least until a September blizzard struck. Then, at midnight, like a great wall, the ice loomed dead ahead. Frozen in a treacherous ice field that might at any moment crush the hull, Captain Cornwall and his 3 passengers and crew of 16 took to safer ice a few hundred yards from the ship. After wireless told the world of their plight, a plane flew from Nome to rescue the passengers, and the crew settled down to a year's stay on the pack. Friendly Eskimos provided fresh reindeer meat, and with the plentiful stores aboard the Beichimo, little hardship was anticipated. Then a 2-day blizzard swept the little camp. When the storm ended on September 26th, the Beichimo and her $1 million cargo had vanished. Far and wide over the ice, the members of the crew searched, finding no trace of the steamer. An Eskimo hunting seals discovered her fully 50 miles from the camp. Hoping to salvage some of his cargo, the captain unloaded all but $30,000 worth of the furs and transported them over the ice to Point Barrow. When a second salvage party returned to the site, the Beichimo had disappeared again. 5 months later, Leslie Melvin, youthful adventurer, encountered the ship while on a 3,000-mile trip from Herschel Island to Nome. In August 1932, the Beichimo first came drifting off Point Barrow. 30 Eskimos went aboard and were caught by a sudden storm after a wild 10-day ride in the grinding ice, barely escaped with their lives. A schooner captain sighted the derelict again off Point Barrow a year later. A Captain Polson of the American schooner Trader was the last to aboard the Beichimo, encountering the ghost late in August 1935. He found her as seaworthy as the day she had disappeared 4 years previously. Then, the Beichimo was really given up for lost, until she came sailing back into sight this year. Tales of the Arctic, published Thursday, June 25, 1925. Boone, Watauga County, North Carolina, through the Watauga Democrat. Tales of the Arctic. Roald Amundsen's recent daring airplane flight with the North Pole as his objective has revived stories of Arctic explorations, some true and others mythical. Dr. Frederick A. Cook achieved worldwide fame through his claim to have reached the pole in advance of Peary, but his story was later declared to have been a clever impostor. For vivid imagination, however, no tale of the North has ever exceeded that recorded in Henry Hudson's log during one of his attempts to discover the much-sought Northwest Passage to China in 1608. It tells of sighting a mermaid in the following record, dated June 15th, in latitude 75 degrees 7 minutes north. One of our company, looking overboard, saw a mermaid, and calling up some of the company to see her, one more came up, and by that time she was close to the ship's side, looking earnestly on the men. A little after a sea came up and overturned her. From the waist upwards, her back and her breast were like a woman, her body being as big as one of us. Her skin was very white, and her hair hanging down behind being the color of black. In her going down they saw her tail, which was like the tail of a porpoise, and speckled like a mackerel. Their names that saw her were Thomas Hitler and Robert Rayner. Like many other myths and superstitions, this yarn was for a long time believed by thousands. Stories equally foolish are believed to this day. Mermaid Evidently Domestic. Published Thursday, December 21st, 1922. Stafford Springs, Connecticut, through the press. Mermaid Evidently Domestic. Sailors report sighting a mermaid 2 miles off from Redondo. It rode the waves within a few feet of their vessel and looked upon them with sad eyes. This mermaid was different from the run of the species in that there was a child at its bosom. It resembled a well-developed human babe of 3 months old. In this respect, the Redondo mermaid is far in advance of any ocean park or Venice mermaid ever seen. No Venice mermaid would think of wheeling a baby cab. They spend all their time brushing their hair. That Monster in Loch Ness is Puzzler. Published Sunday, November 5th, 1961. Key West, Florida, through the Key West Citizen. That Monster in Loch Ness is Puzzler, by Ronald Thompson. Fort Augustus, Scotland. More than 700 people, many of them stone-cold sober, claim to have clapped eyes on the Loch Ness Monster since it reared into the world headlines 28 years ago. Since 1933, scarcely a month has gone by without someone spotting the curious creature with the scaly back, humps, and lashing tail. It has been seen swimming and diving, basking and rolling, splashing, wallowing, and generally having fun. Wars come and go, governments topple, and fashions die, but the monster sails on through the years as one of those permanent fixtures in a world of changes. It is pleasant to report, after visiting the communities around Loch Ness and interviewing experts on the subject, the brute has been having a golden year. Here in Fort Augustus, at the southern end of the loch, there is a feeling that important developments are in the air. Certainly the last few months have brought about a fresh stirring of interest in the denizen of the loch, a grim stretch of water 24 miles long and going down to depths of 900 feet in parts. A scientific expedition from Oxford and Cambridge universities spent 4 summer weeks stationed around the loch and reported 2 sightings of an unexplained moving object, plus several odd scrawls on their echo-sounding equipment. The scientists later published a report concluding that the Loch Ness could easily contain some strange and unusual creature, but irrefutable proof of its existence must await a future expedition. At a recent sighting, mourners at a funeral on the banks of the loch at Fort Augustus said the monster had popped out of the water nearby and then pushed off in the opposite direction at a spanking pace. Some local people scoff, but there are highly respected people of integrity who have claimed sightings. Some say the monster is 20 feet long, others 50 feet. Its head is variously described as like a snake's, a swan's, a horse's, and once or twice like a camel's. Several viewers have reported the presence of 2 horns, which opens up horrific possibilities. Nearly everyone agrees that when it gets going, it really moves, at speeds of up to 30 miles an hour or so. One of Britain's foremost experts on underwater life, Dr. Denise Tucker, maintains that evidence in support of the presence in the loch of a large, strange creature, perhaps a prehistoric remnant, is overwhelming. But most zoologists think that the monster is really a big seal, an enormous eel, or even a swimming deer. Ghost Call Checked In, Todd Death. Published Wednesday, December 18th, 1935, Washington, D.C., through the Washington Daily News. Ghost Call Checked In, Todd Death. Police are puzzled by story of friend about phone talk. Inquest may reveal why film star couldn't enter home, why she went into her garage. By United Press. Hollywood, California. Police authorities responsible for explaining the strange death of Thelma Todd work today in a maze of conflicting evidence that would do credit to a Hollywood mystery scenario. Coroner Frank Nance called in an inquest to review all known facts relating to Miss Todd's death and last hours. She was found Monday slumped in her auto in a garage near her beach cafe. Nance issued the order when a partial autopsy revealed Miss Todd was not intoxicated at the time of her death, that heart disease was not the cause, that her blood showed fatal carbon monoxide gas. Her death is a mystery. Mystery in the death of Thelma Todd, blonde screen beauty, showed here as she was found slumped over in her touring car, grew deeper as Los Angeles police joined county authorities in the investigation. Todd death still mystifies officials. Ghost call. Still prominent in the police investigation was a ghost telephone call, which Mrs. Wallace Ford said she received from Miss Todd at 4:10 p.m. Sunday, some 12 hours after the blonde film actress must have been dead. In the face of hints that the call might have been made on an extension line by some prankster among the guests at Mrs. Ford's cocktail party, the actor's wife held her ground and reiterated her belief the call was from Thelma. Despite all evidence which police say points to Thelma's death early Sunday, I know I talked to her on the telephone that afternoon, Mrs. Ford said. At first I thought the party said Velma, and I asked Velma who. She replied, No, Thelma Todd, your little hot toddy. Get a hold of yourself, Toots. No one but Thelma ever used the nickname Little Hot Toddy. Seat guest. She said she was bringing over a surprise guest in a half hour. She never came. At 7 o'clock, George Baker, an assistant director and a friend of Thelma's, got worried. He called her home at the beach. The man who answered said he hadn't seen Thelma all day. Perhaps everything would be cleared up if this mysterious person Thelma intended to bring to my party would step forward and explain. A theory is held that Miss Todd was unable to enter her apartment because she had no key. Roland West, part owner of the Todd Cafe, and for some time her companion about Hollywood, told detectives he informed the actress before she went to the Trocadero party that he would lock the place at 2 a.m. Battery exhausted. West said he locked up about the scheduled time and retired about 2:30 a.m. at his apartment, some 200 yards above the Todd apartment on a bluff overlooking the Pacific. West's apartment is about 100 yards from the garage, in which Miss Todd kept the auto in which her body was found. Pasquale DeCicco, divorced husband of the actress, will not attend the inquest or funeral. He is en route east by airplane to spend the holidays with his mother in New York. Before leaving Hollywood, DeCicco said despite their divorce, he and Thelma remained friends. DeCicco was willed $1 by Miss Todd, according to A. Ronald Button, the victim's attorney. Bulk of the estate, which may reach $250,000 in cash, security, jewels, and real estate, will go to Miss Todd's mother. Private funeral services will be held at the Wee Kirk o' the Heather Forest Lawn Memorial Cemetery Thursday. Reverend Harold Propp of the Hollywood Baptist Church will officiate. The body will be cremated. The Weeping Statue, published Thursday, January 30th, 1930. Mora, Kennebec County, Minnesota, through the Kennebec County Times. The Weeping Statue. In the ruins of Arbroath Abbey, in Scotland, is the decapitated statue of a Scottish king, and at his feet lies a headless lion. This is King William I, called William the Lion. He founded the abbey in memory of his friend Thomas Becket. Here the king was buried, and during the Reformation his statue and that of the lion were beheaded. It is a strange fact that if the weather is going to be wet, the stone over the region of the king's heart always becomes shiny and moist, and sometimes water actually trickles down. That is why it is called the Weeping Statue. A Statue Weeping by Steam, published Friday 13th, 1866, Macon, Georgia, through the Southern Christian Advocate. A statue weeping by steam. A singular discovery has been made in a church in one of the faubourgs of Milan. A statue of St. Magdalene, which has long been famous for weeping in the presence of unbelievers, was recently moved in order to facilitate repairs for the church. It was found that the statue contained an arrangement for boiling water. The steam passed up into the head and was there condensed. The water thus made its way by a couple of pipes to the eyes and trickled down upon the cheeks of the image, so the wonderful miracle was performed. Would sell husband's tomb on which own statue weeping stands. Published Saturday, June 3rd, 1922. Bridgeport, Connecticut, through the Bridgeport Times and Evening Farmer. When Henry Wyson, Brooklyn, found himself about to die, he had an estate of $100,000, which he left to my good wife Elizabeth, provided that she erect over his remains a mausoleum to cost no less than $25,000, and if she did not, the remainder would go to the daughter of a friend. The widow built the tomb and topped it with a life-size statue of herself weeping for her husband's death. Or perhaps it was for his folly. The widow's impoverished and seeks permission to sell statue and mausoleum. The will of Frederick E. Castle, Newark, was admitted to probate yesterday. His testament reads, "All my earthly goods I have in store, to my wife I leave forevermore. I freely give no limit, do I fix. This is my will, and she the executrix. This departed may not endure so long in the minds of those who visit cemeteries, but his widow has more reason to remember him fondly. The poetry isn't much, but it expresses a sentiment more tender than the mausoleum with its weeping statue does." Weeping statue held authentic. Published Monday, July 19th, 1954. Frederiksted, St. Croix, Virgin Islands, through the West End News. Weeping statue held authentic. Palermo, Sicily. The Roman Catholic bishops of Sicily have endorsed the authenticity of the Weeping Madonnas of Syracuse. A foot-high terracotta and enamel statuette of the Virgin Mary credited with healing hundreds of persons. Ernesto Cardinal Ruffini, Archbishop of Palermo, broadcast the bishop's communique over the Italian radio. He also asked that a shrine be erected on the spot where the statuette's manifestation of tears was reported to have occurred first on August 29th of 1953. Since that day, hundreds of thousands of Italians and tourists from other lands have jammed the narrow Via degli Orti, Street of the Gardens, one of the humblest streets in Syracuse, to seek the Madonna's intervention. Mysterious Disappearance of Young Girl. Published Thursday, July 20th, 1911. Salem, Oregon, through the Daily Capital Journal. Mysterious Disappearance of Young Girl. Mary Gertrude Ilg, pretty 23-year-old girl, vanishes from her home Monday. Nothing seen of her since. San Francisco, July 20th. Puzzled by their failure to find Mary Gertrude Ilg, a pretty 23-year-old girl who vanished from her home here Monday evening, police, Pinkertons, and the girl's family today are running down every possible clue to the strangest disappearance mystery San Francisco has had in years. From San Jose today came a story which caused the family to immediately dispatch detectives to that town. H.T. Anderson of San Jose declared positively that he saw the missing girl pass his residence late yesterday in company with a young man. This information was the second alleged direct clue to Miss Ilg's whereabouts since she disappeared. It was alleged she was seen in Fruitvale yesterday. R.H. Grip, the girl's fiancé, and her relatives so far have scouted the police theory of an elopement and fear she has met with some darker fate. The mystery deepens. Oakland, California, July 20th. The mystery surrounding the disappearance of Miss Mary Ilg of San Francisco is now deeper than ever. For this morning, Mrs. W. R. Parker of Fruitvale, after being shown photographs of the missing girl, declared that the one who sought employment from her yesterday morning was much younger than Miss Ilg. The Complete and Most Mysterious Disappearance of Miss Louise G. Nash. Published Sunday, July 27, 1902. Washington, D.C. through the Washington Times. The Complete and Most Mysterious Disappearance of Miss Louise G. Nash. A very experienced and observant traveler once remarked that he could walk out of his apartments at one of New York's largest and most extensively patronized hostelries, pass through the groups of guests in the lobby and the hallways below, and go any place he wished to in the whole world without a single person observing or noting the direction he took. In this way, he said, making not the slightest attempt to move secretly, he could disappear as completely from the presence of companions or those about him as though the earth had opened and swallowed him up. This somewhat marvelous assertion has been verified right here in Washington, and that too by a woman in ordinary life. It has been nearly 2 months now since Miss Louise G. Nash, the school teacher, simply walked out of her home and vanished utterly from view. Her disappearance grows more mysterious as time passes, and no communication is received from her or from any persons who might have seen her. Everything within the power of the local police and detective force, as well as all over the country, has been done to locate the missing woman, but to what avail? The mystery is as incapable of being solved now as it ever was, if not more so. About 4 o'clock on the afternoon of June 2nd, she was missed from her home at 1412 Fifth Street, Northwest, where she lived with her mother. She had 4 brothers and 1 sister, none of whom lived at home with her and her mother. Her father died several years ago. Mrs. Nash and her daughter possessed sufficient means to support them comfortably, without either of them doing a stroke of work. Yet Miss Nash preferred to teach school and held a position under the district government as a teacher for several years. For some time, she had been stationed in the 2nd Division at the Taylor School, but as to what exact length of time she had been a teacher, there is a difference of opinion. The young lady herself, in talking of the matter one day shortly before her sudden leave-taking, stated that it had been 15 years. On the other hand, her mother is sure that it was not more than 13 years. Quiet, reticent, and impulsive only in rare instances, she was not the person to confide in anyone. Even to her mother, into whose company she was thrown almost entirely while at home, she seldom mentioned a word concerning the plans and little affairs of her everyday life. When she desired to act in any manner, she acted alone, without telling a soul, and in a manner that rather placed a check upon all tendency to question her. She studied hard, read quite a good deal, and said little. All her life it is said that she rigidly observed the rule of keeping her own counsel. She had friends, as any other young woman. She was not communicative even to them. She came of good family and was attractive. From a child addicted to performing apparently peculiar actions at times, Miss Nash was not bound by the ordinary stereotyped channels of existence that limit the lives of most young women. Yet her life was decidedly commonplace. She possessed a lovable disposition and made friends readily. She had no enemies. With the pupils whom she taught daily, she was a favorite. To the best behaved and the most unruly alike, she was kind, gentle, and patient, always ready to forgive and forget an offense. She was friendly with the boys and girls, and in return, they admired her. Uncommunicative regarding her plans, Miss Nash had frequently left her home and mother and gone off without saying a word to anyone, to visit friends elsewhere, or to seek a quiet rest in the country. For these sudden and peculiar journeys, she made no preparation so far as could be learned. When the fancy struck her, she would merely leave without saying so much as goodbye, and return when she was good and ready. Sometimes she would write her mother during her absence telling her where she was. Oftener she would not. Miss Nash went out on June 2nd, ostensibly for the purpose of doing some shopping. She has never returned. About 4 o'clock in the afternoon, her mother discovered that her daughter was out, That night she did not return, nor the next day, nor the following day, nor any time that week. Mrs. Nash had supposed her daughter had merely gone off on another of her characteristic jaunts, but as time passed by and no word came from her, she thought it was time to institute some investigations. She did. Letters were written, the machinery of the local police department and departments elsewhere was set in motion. Newspapers took up the matter of the young woman's strange disappearance. Her pictures were published broadcast. The matter was studied from all possible viewpoints. No light could be cast upon it. Nor have the days and weeks, now rounding rapidly into 2 full months that have passed since her disappearance, revealed any break in the clouds that obscure her fate. Once more, the words of that traveler who spoke of how little the people of the world really know of what their neighbors are doing until their attention is arrested by some peculiar circumstances are being verified all in their force. Her mother had talked several times of leaving Washington and moving out to Kensington, where she had a great many friends. This apparently did not please the young lady. She demurred, but made no protest. The very suggestion that she had a love affair was utterly scouted by her mother. Never in her whole life, she said, had she evinced the slightest trace of being in love. She was not even as fond of the society and company of men as most young women are. Then came her disappearance. Mrs. Nash wrote to the college in Philadelphia with which her daughter had corresponded, thinking that perhaps she had gone there to avail herself of the summer course. She was not there. Friends in Mountain Lake Park, Maryland, where mother and daughter had spent a month one summer, were communicated with. The young lady had not been there. It was said by one of her former pupils that she was seen at a prominent department store right here in Washington on July 2nd. The statement was never verified substantially. The little boy may or may not have seen her. The missing woman's brothers joined in the search for their sister.